The blood-red sunset painted the vast Wyoming sky as Zara Gilbert clutched the weathered letter in her trembling hands, tears streaming down her dust-stained cheeks. It was 1875, and the promise of a new life in San Francisco had just crumbled to dust with a few hastily scrawled words. Cannot marry. Do not follow. Goodbye. The cool autumn breeze swept through the small frontier town of Laramie, Wyoming territory, as Zara stood frozen outside the post office. At 22, she found herself alone, 3 months with child and abandoned in a place where unmarried mothers were treated worse than criminals. The journey west from Boston had depleted nearly all her savings, spent chasing a man who had promised her the world and left her with nothing but shame. "Miss, are you all right?" A deep voice startled her from her thoughts. Zara hastily wiped her tears, tucking the letter into her pocket before turning to face the stranger. Her eyes met those of a tall man with a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. His dark hair curled beneath a well-worn hat, and despite his rugged appearance, his eyes held a gentle concern that made her breath catch. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice betraying her as it cracked on the second word. The man's gaze was steady, not unkind but clearly unconvinced. "Vincent Blackburn," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Most folks just call me Vince." "Zara Gilbert," she replied automatically, years of proper Boston upbringing making it impossible to ignore a direct introduction. Vincent's eyes flickered briefly to her midsection, not in judgment, but with a quiet understanding that made Zara's cheeks burn with embarrassment. Had her condition become so obvious already? "Looks like that letter brought bad news," he observed quietly, nodding toward her pocket where the crumpled paper was half visible. "The worst," Zara admitted before she could stop herself. "I traveled all this way to meet my fiancé, only to discover he's no longer interested in that arrangement." Vincent nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry to hear that. You have family back east you can return to." The question sent a fresh wave of pain through Zara's chest. "No, my parents disowned me when they discovered." She placed a protective hand over her barely swollen belly. A beat of silence passed between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the bustling frontier town horses' hooves on packed dirt, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, raucous laughter from the saloon down the street. "You got a place to stay tonight?" Vincent asked finally, his tone practical rather than suggestive. "The boarding house, but only for another night. My funds are." She trailed off, unwilling to admit just how desperate her situation had become. Vincent seemed to consider something, his eyes scanning the street thoughtfully before returning to her face. "I've got a ranch about 5 miles out of town. Nothing fancy, but I'm looking for help with the house. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing." He paused, then added, "There's a small cabin on the property. It's yours if you want it." Zara stared at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." A ghost of a smile touched Vincent's lips. "Let's just say I've seen enough of life to know sometimes folks deserve better than what they get." He looked at her directly. "I'm not offering charity, Miss Gilbert. I'm offering honest work and a roof that won't judge what's beneath it." The sincerity in his voice made something shift inside her. In Boston, unmarried and with child, she would be shunned from society forever. Here in this wild territory, perhaps she could build something new from the ashes of her broken dreams. What about? She gestured vaguely toward her stomach. Vincent's response was immediate and firm. "I'll be there for both of you." 5 simple words that changed everything. Not a proposal, not a declaration of love, but something perhaps more precious, a promise of safety when Zara needed it most. "When would I start?" she asked, her decision made before she even realized it. "Got your things packed? I'm heading back before sundown." An hour later, Zara found herself perched beside Vincent on a wagon loaded with supplies, heading away from town and toward the unknown. The rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves and the creaking of the wagon wheels filled the silence between them. "Been in Laramie long?" Vincent asked eventually. 3 days. I arrived expecting William, my fiancé, to meet me at the station." Zara's hands tightened in her lap. "He never came." The letter was waiting at the post office instead. Vincent nodded but didn't press for more details. The ranch isn't much to look at yet. Started building it up about 2 years ago. Got about 60 head of cattle, a few horses, some chickens. You run it alone. Zara asked, grateful for the change in subject. Got a ranch hand, Emmett. Good man, stays in the bunkhouse, comes and goes with the seasons. Vincent adjusted the reins slightly. My sister Martha used to keep house, but she got married last spring, moved to Montana Territory with her husband. The landscape opened up before them, vast, rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and the occasional stand of cottonwoods. The immensity of the open country made Zara feel both insignificant and somehow free, as if the very air contained possibilities that couldn't exist in the confines of Boston society. "It's beautiful," she murmured, almost to herself. Vincent glanced at her, something like surprise flitting across his features. Most Easterners don't see it that way at first, usually just see the hardship. "Oh, I can see that too," Zara replied honestly, "but there's something honest about it. The land doesn't pretend to be anything it's not." A comfortable silence fell between them after that. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, Zara found herself studying Vincent's profile. He wasn't handsome in the way William had been, with his smooth hands and carefully styled hair. Vincent's features were strong, weathered by sun and wind, his hands calloused from work. But there was something undeniably appealing about the quiet confidence with which he held himself. "There it is," Vincent said finally, nodding toward a cluster of buildings nestled in a shallow valley ahead. Blackburn Ranch. The main house was modest but solid, a 2-story structure built of logs with a covered porch wrapping around the front. A smaller cabin stood about 50 yards away, and beyond that, a barn and corral where several horses grazed in the evening light. It wasn't grand, but it was well kept, speaking of hard work and care. "The cabin's been empty since Emmett decided he preferred the bunkhouse," Vincent explained as they approached. "It's nothing fancy, but it's sound. No leaks, good stove." As they pulled up to the main house, a lean man with a sun-browned face emerged from the barn. He eyed the wagon with open curiosity. "Emmett," Vincent called by way of greeting. "This is Miss Gilbert. She'll be taking over the housekeeping and cooking." If Emmett was surprised, he didn't show it. He merely nodded respectfully. "Madam, let's get you settled," Vincent said, helping Zara down from the wagon. "Emmett, can you unload the supplies? I'll show Miss Gilbert to the cabin." The small building was simple but clean, a single room with a bed, table, 2 chairs, and a small stove for cooking and heat. Shelves lined one wall, and a window looked out over the rolling landscape. "There's a pump out back for water," Vincent explained. "Outhouse is behind those trees." "Not much, but it's perfect," Zara interrupted, feeling the first genuine smile in days tugging at her lips. "Thank you, Mr. Blackburn." Vincent looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Like I said, it's not charity. Breakfast is at sunrise. We can talk about your other duties then." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There's food in the cupboard to tide you over tonight. Get some rest, Miss Gilbert." Left alone, Zara sank onto the edge of the bed, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "Well, little one," she whispered, "it seems we've found a place to land. For now, at least." The next morning, Zara woke before dawn, determined to prove her worth. She'd spent her life in comfortable circumstances in Boston, but she wasn't afraid of hard work. Dressing quickly in her plainest skirt and blouse, she made her way to the main house and found the kitchen empty, but the stove already lit. Taking stock of the supplies, she set about making a hearty breakfast of flapjacks, bacon, and coffee. The physical work of cooking was a welcome distraction from her thoughts, and by the time footsteps sounded on the porch, she had the table set and food ready. Vincent entered first, stopping short at the sight of the prepared meal. "You're up early." "I wanted to earn my keep," Zara replied simply. Emmett followed Vincent inside, his surprise even more evident. "Smells mighty fine, Miss Gilbert." The men sat down to eat, and Zara served them before taking her own place. She noticed that Vincent waited until she was seated before beginning to eat, a small courtesy that touched her unexpectedly. "This is real good," Emmett said after his first bite. "Been a while since we had proper cooking around here." Vincent shot him a look that was half amusement, half warning. "You saying my cooking wasn't proper?" "I'm saying charcoal ain't a flavor, boss," Emmett replied with a straight face. Zara couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her, and for a moment, the tension that had been her constant companion seemed to ease slightly. "We'll be moving cattle to the north pasture today," Vincent said, returning to his breakfast. "Probably won't be back till sundown." "I'll have supper waiting," Zara assured him, "and I thought I'd start on giving the house a good cleaning." Vincent nodded. "Whatever you think needs doing. Just don't overdo it in your—" He glanced briefly at her midsection, clearly uncomfortable. "Condition." The days settled into a routine. Zara would rise early to prepare breakfast, clean the main house during the day, and have supper ready when the men returned. In the evenings, she would retreat to her cabin, where she often sat by the window, sewing baby clothes from fabric Vincent had brought back from town without comment. As the weeks passed, Zara found herself watching Vincent with growing interest. He was a man of few words but consistent actions. She noticed how he always made sure the woodpile near her cabin was stocked, how he repaired her door when it began to stick, all without being asked or expecting thanks. A month into her stay, a fierce autumn storm blew in, bringing driving rain and howling winds that shook the little cabin. Zara huddled under her blankets, trying to ignore the way the wind seemed to find every crack and crevice. A knock at her door startled her. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she opened it to find Vincent standing there, rain streaming off his hat, a lantern in his hand. "Storm's getting worse," he said without preamble. "Cabin roof's old, main house is sturdier." "I'll be fine," Zara insisted, even as a particularly strong gust of wind made the cabin creak ominously. Vincent's expression didn't change. "Wasn't a suggestion, Miss Gilbert." Something in his tone brooked no argument, and truthfully, Zara was relieved. Gathering her shawl more tightly, she followed him through the driving rain to the main house. Inside, the warmth from the large fireplace enveloped her immediately. Vincent hung his dripping coat and hat by the door, then gestured toward the stairs. "Second room on the right was Martha's. Bed's made up." "Thank you," Zara said, suddenly aware of how she must look hair disheveled, nightgown visible beneath her hastily donned shawl. "I appreciate your concern." Vincent nodded, his eyes briefly meeting hers before looking away. "Get some sleep. Storm should pass by morning." Upstairs, Zara found a cozy bedroom with a quilt-covered bed and simple furnishings. Through the window, she could see her cabin, small and vulnerable in the storm's fury. The contrast between her solitary existence there and the solid security of the main house wasn't lost on her. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams troubled by memories of William's promises and the reality of his abandonment. She woke several times to the sound of the storm, each time reassured by the sturdy walls around her and the knowledge that Vincent was somewhere in the house below. When morning came, the storm had passed, leaving a washed, clean sky and puddles dotting the yard. Zara dressed and made her way downstairs, finding Vincent at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hands. "Morning," he greeted her. "Roof still on your cabin. Checked it at first light." "You didn't have to do that," Zara said, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Part of looking after what's mine," Vincent replied, then seemed to realize how his words might sound. "The property, I mean." Zara busied herself with starting breakfast, hiding the small smile his flustered correction had prompted. "Of course." As she worked, Vincent watched her, his expression unreadable. "How are you feeling?" he asked finally. "The baby, I mean." The question surprised her. In the month she'd been at the ranch, neither man had directly addressed her pregnancy, though her condition was becoming increasingly obvious. "We're both well," Zara answered, one hand automatically moving to her growing belly. "Thank you for asking." Vincent nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good, that's good." A comfortable silence fell between them as Zara continued preparing breakfast. For the first time since William's letter, she felt a tentative peace settling over her. It wasn't the life she had planned, but perhaps it could be a life worth living all the same. The weeks turned into months, and as winter settled over the ranch, Zara's body changed with the seasons. By December, her pregnancy was unmistakable, her belly round and firm beneath her loosened dresses. To her surprise, neither Vincent nor Emmett ever treated her with anything but respect, a stark contrast to the whispers and stares she would have endured in Boston society. One evening, As snow fell softly outside, Zara sat by the fire in the main house, darning socks while Vincent carved a small wooden horse. It had become their custom to spend evenings this way, she working on mending or sewing, he carving or reading, Emmett often playing soft tunes on his harmonica before retiring early to the bunkhouse. "My pa taught me," Vincent explained when he caught her watching his hands work the wood. "Said a man should know how to create something beautiful, not just useful." "It's lovely," Zara commented, admiring the graceful lines of the small horse taking shape under his knife. Vincent's hands stilled for a moment. Thought the baby might like it someday, for playing. The simple gesture brought unexpected tears to Zara's eyes. "That's very kind of you." Vincent looked uncomfortable with her emotion. "Just wood and time, got plenty of both." "Not everyone would be so thoughtful," Zara said softly, "especially to—" She hesitated, then continued, "to a woman in my situation." Vincent set aside his carving and met her gaze directly. "Your situation, as you call it, isn't of your making alone. Man who leaves a woman carrying his child isn't worth the dirt beneath your feet." The vehemence in his voice surprised her. "You sound like you speak from experience." A shadow passed over Vincent's face. "My sister Martha, man who promised to marry her, disappeared when she told him she was expecting. Baby didn't make it past the 3rd month." His jaw tightened at the memory. "Nearly lost Martha too." "I'm so sorry," Zara whispered, understanding now why he had been so quick to offer her shelter. "She got through it, met a good man eventually." Vincent picked up his carving again. "Point is, I've seen how cruel people can be. Doesn't seem right to pile more hurt on someone already carrying a heavy load." Zara's hands trembled slightly as she resumed her darning. "When I first realized I was with child and then received William's letter, I thought my life was over. In Boston, it would have been at least the life I knew." "And now?" Vincent asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Now I think perhaps it's just beginning differently than I expected." Zara smiled faintly. "There's a freedom here I never had in Boston, despite all its so-called civilization." Vincent's eyes held hers for a moment longer than usual. "Glad to hear it." The baby kicked then, a strong movement that made Zara gasp softly and place her hand on her belly. "Everything all right?" Vincent asked, concern immediately replacing his usual reserve. "Yes, just active tonight," Zara explained. Then, acting on impulse, she asked, "Would you like to feel—" Vincent looked startled by the offer, then uncertain. "I wouldn't want to intrude." "It's not an intrusion if you're invited," Zara said gently. After a moment's hesitation, Vincent set aside his carving and moved to sit beside her on the small sofa. Tentatively, he extended his hand. "Here," Zara guided his calloused palm to the spot where the baby was most active. For a moment, nothing happened, and then a distinct thump pressed against his hand. Vincent's expression transformed surprise, wonder, and something deeper washing over his features. "Strong," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "Like someone else I know," Zara replied without thinking. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Vincent's hand remained on her belly a moment longer than necessary before he withdrew it, clearing his throat. "Getting late," he said, rising from the sofa. "You should rest." Zara nodded, gathering her darning. "Good night, Vincent." "Vince," he corrected her quietly. "My friends call me Vince." As winter deepened, so did the connection between them. It wasn't spoken of, but it was there in the small gestures, the way Vincent made sure the path to her cabin was always cleared of snow, how he began to linger longer over breakfast, finding reasons to engage her in conversation. For her part, Zara found herself looking forward to their evenings by the fire, to the quiet moments when it was just the two of them. Christmas approached, bringing with it a rare, festive atmosphere to the ranch. Emmett strung pine boughs around the main house doorway, while Zara baked cookies and pies with precious ingredients Vincent had brought from town. On Christmas Eve, they gathered in the main house for a special dinner. "This is mighty fine, Miss Gilbert," Emmett said appreciatively, helping himself to more roast chicken. "Best Christmas meal I've had in years." "Thank you, Emmett," Zara smiled. "And please, after all these months, I think you can call me Zara." Emmett grinned. "Yes, madam, I mean Zara." After dinner, they exchanged simple gifts. Emmett presented Zara with a hand-carved wooden spoon while she gave him a new woolen scarf she had knitted. For Vincent, she had secretly made a new shirt, noticing how his others were beginning to fray at the cuffs and collar. "This is fine work," Vincent said, running his fingers over the neat stitches. "Thank you. You're welcome, Vince," Zara replied. Using his preferred name deliberately, Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said, handing it to her. Inside, Zara found a silver locket on a delicate chain. It was simple but beautiful, the surface engraved with a small flower pattern. "Vince, it's lovely," she breathed, touching it reverently. "But this is too much. It opens," he said by way of response. "Thought you might want to put a picture of the baby in it someday." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. "Thank you, I'll treasure it." Emmett, sensing the emotion in the room, made a show of yawning. "Think I'll turn in. Long day tomorrow, even if it is Christmas." He nodded to them both and stepped out into the snowy night, heading for the bunkhouse. Left alone, Zara and Vincent sat in comfortable silence by the fire. Outside, snow fell softly, covering the world in pristine white. "First Christmas away from home?" Vincent asked after a while. Zara nodded. "Though I'm not sure where home is anymore." She touched the locket at her throat. "Boston stopped being home when my parents made it clear I wasn't welcome back." "What happened? If you don't mind my asking," Zara sighed. "I met William at a friend's dinner party. He was charming, handsome, said he was in Boston on business but lived in San Francisco. We began courting, always chaperoned, always proper, until it wasn't." She blushed at the memory. "He proposed, promised we'd be married as soon as I could join him out west. My parents were skeptical. They wanted me to marry a Boston man, but I was determined." She paused, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "When I discovered I was with child, I wrote to tell him." His reply seemed enthusiastic. He sent money for my journey and said to come immediately so we could be married before the baby arrived. Her voice grew bitter. "I told my parents I was leaving to marry William immediately. They were furious, said if I left, I shouldn't bother coming back. I chose William. And then he wasn't there," Vincent finished for her. "No, just that letter, saying he'd changed his mind and was sorry for any inconvenience." Zara laughed hollowly. "Inconvenience? As if being abandoned with child 3,000 miles from home was a mere scheduling problem." Vincent's expression darkened. "Man like that doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as you." "I've had months to think about it," Zara said quietly, "and I've realized something. William's betrayal set me free in a way. In Boston, I'd have been trapped in a life where appearances mattered more than happiness. Here," she gestured around them, "here I can just be Zara." "And who is she? Just Zara?" Vincent asked, his voice gentle. Zara considered the question. "Someone stronger than she knew. Someone who's learning that the worst thing she feared, being alone, isn't actually the worst thing at all." She met his eyes. "And someone who's grateful every day for the kindness of a man who had no reason to offer it." Vincent held her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "Getting late," he said finally, though he made no move to rise. "Storm's picking up. Might be best if you stayed here tonight." "I think you're right," Zara agreed, listening to the wind howling outside. "Thank you, Vince." That night, as Zara lay in Martha's old room, she felt the baby move within her and placed her hand over the spot. "We're going to be all right, little one," she whispered. "I think we've found somewhere we belong." January brought bitterly cold days and long nights. Zara's pregnancy advanced, her body growing heavier and more unwieldy. Vincent insisted she move permanently into the main house until after the baby comes, citing the brutal temperatures and her increasingly limited mobility. 8th month's no time to be trudging through snow to an empty cabin, he'd said firmly when she'd protested that she was imposing. Now in her final weeks, Zara found herself grateful for the arrangement. The stairs were becoming a challenge, but having the kitchen and main living areas just steps away was a blessing. Vincent had taken to doing some of the heavier housework without comment, and even Emmett had begun carrying buckets of water for her without being asked. One evening in late January, as Zara sat by the fire mending one of Vincent's shirts, a sharp pain gripped her midsection, making her gasp. Vincent looked up from his newspaper immediately. "What is it?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Nothing, just another pain cut off her words, this one stronger than the first. Oh, Vincent was on his feet instantly, crossing to her side. The baby, Zara nodded, her face pale. I think so, but it's too early, almost 3 weeks early. Babies come when they come, Vincent said with a calmness he clearly didn't feel. Emmett, he called toward the door. Emmett, the ranch hand, appeared moments later, stamping snow from his boots. What's the? He stopped, taking in the scene. Baby coming, ride for Mrs. Thornton, Vincent instructed, referring to the midwife who lived in a nearby homestead. Fast as you can. As Emmett dashed back out into the night, Vincent turned his attention back to Zara. Let's get you upstairs. Can you walk? Zara nodded, though another pain was building. Vincent supported her carefully as they made their way to her room, his strong arm around her waist providing steady reassurance. Once upstairs, Vincent helped her to the bed, his movements gentle but efficient. What do you need? He asked, looking utterly out of his depth but determined. Water, clean towels, Zara managed between breaths, and stay with me until Mrs. Thornton arrives. Vincent's expression softened. I'm not going anywhere. The next hours passed in a blur of pain and waiting. Mrs. Thornton arrived, efficiently taking charge of the situation, while Vincent was banished to the hallway. Zara could hear him pacing outside the door, his footsteps a steady counterpoint to her increasingly rapid breathing. You're doing fine, girl, Mrs. Thornton assured her, her experienced hands checking Zara's progress. Baby's in a hurry, but everything looks as it should. The labor intensified as the night wore on. Zara bit back cries of pain, not wanting to alarm Vincent further, but as dawn approached, the effort became too much. Vincent. She called out during a particularly brutal contraction. The door opened immediately, and he was at her side in 2 long strides, concern etched on his features. She's asking for you, Mrs. Thornton said, seemingly unsurprised. You can stay if you've the stomach for it. Otherwise, wait outside. I'll stay, Vincent said firmly, his eyes never leaving Zara's face. He took her hand and Zara clutched it gratefully, drawing strength from his solid presence. I'm scared, she admitted in a whisper. You're the strongest person I know, Vincent replied simply. You can do this. His unwavering faith gave Zara renewed determination. With Mrs. Thornton's guidance and Vincent's steady support, she pushed through the final stages of labor until, as the first rays of morning sun streamed through the window, a thin wail broke the tension in the room. A boy, Mrs. Thornton announced, wrapping the squalling infant in a clean blanket. Small but strong. Tears streamed down Zara's face as the midwife placed the tiny bundle in her arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair and red, wrinkled features that Zara thought were the most beautiful sight she'd ever seen. Hello, little one, she whispered, touching his cheek gently. I've been waiting for you. She glanced up to find Vincent watching them, an expression of wonder on his face. Without thinking, she shifted the baby slightly. Would you like to hold him? Vincent hesitated, then carefully took the infant in his large hands. The contrast was striking, the tiny newborn cradled against the cowboy's broad chest, his calloused fingers supporting the small head with unexpected tenderness. He's perfect, Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. He looked at Zara, something unspoken passing between them. What will you call him? Zara had thought about names for months, but in that moment, looking at Vincent holding her son with such care, she made her decision. Matthew, it means gift from God, Mrs. Thornton, who had been quietly cleaning up, nodded approvingly. A fine name for a fine boy. Now Miss Gilbert needs rest, and this little one needs to nurse. She took the baby from Vincent and returned him to Zara's arms. Vincent reluctantly moved toward the door. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. Anything at all. In the days that followed, Zara and baby Matthew settled into a new routine. Despite Mrs. Thornton's offers to find a wet nurse, Zara insisted on nursing Matthew herself, marveling at the bond it created between them. Vincent had moved a rocking chair into her room, and she spent hours there, singing softly to her son as she rocked. Vincent kept a respectful distance, but was never far away. He would check on them throughout the day, bringing meals or fresh water, always with the same question. Do you need anything? A week after Matthew's birth, Zara ventured downstairs for the first time, the baby wrapped snugly against her chest. She found Vincent at the kitchen table, going over ranch accounts. "There you are," he said, rising immediately. "Should you be up?" Mrs. Thornton said walking would do me good, Zara replied, easing herself carefully into a chair. "And I think Matthew wanted to see more of the world than just my bedroom ceiling." Vincent's face softened as he looked at the sleeping infant. "He's growing already." "Like a weed," Zara agreed. "Vincent, I need to talk to you about our arrangement." A guardedness came into his expression. "What about it? You've been more than generous, but I can't impose on you forever. Once I'm fully recovered, I should find a position in town, somewhere Matthew and I can know," Vincent interrupted, his voice firm but not unkind. "This is your home now, both of you." Zara felt tears threatening. "But we're not your responsibility. You've already done more than anyone could expect." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his eyes on Matthew's sleeping face. When Martha lost her baby, she said the worst part was losing the future she'd imagined. All the moments she'd never have. He looked up at Zara. "I don't want you to lose your future or Matthew to grow up without a place he belongs." "But what about your future?" Zara asked softly. "Someday you'll want to marry, have a family of your own." Something changed in Vincent's expression, a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "Zara," he said, her name almost a caress on his lips, "I need to tell you something." He took a deep breath. "These past months, watching you, knowing you, I've come to care for you, more than I should, perhaps." Zara's heart beat faster at his words. "Vince, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking anything of you. You've been through too much, and you have Matthew to think about. I just want you to know that if when you're ready to think about a future, I'd like to be part of it." "Both your futures." Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now," Vincent assured her. "Just know that this is your home for as long as you want it to be, no strings attached." Matthew stirred against Zara's chest, making small snuffling noises that signaled he was waking up. Vincent stood, giving them space. "I should check on the herd. Think about what I said, but don't feel pressured. Whatever you decide, nothing changes unless you want it to." As February melted into March, and March bloomed into April, Zara found herself thinking about Vincent's words almost daily. She watched him with Matthew, the way he would talk to the baby as if he understood every word, how he had crafted a beautiful wooden cradle that now sat in the corner of her room, the genuine delight on his face when Matthew began to smile. For his part, Vincent never pressed the issue, never made her feel uncomfortable or obligated. He simply continued as before, supportive, kind, present. But sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, Zara would catch him watching her with an expression that made her heart flutter. By the time Matthew was 3 months old, Zara had made her decision. One evening, after the baby was asleep in his cradle, she found Vincent on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, stepping outside. Vincent moved over on the bench to make room for her. "Matthew asleep, finally," Zara smiled. "He fought it hard tonight." "Stubborn," Vincent observed, "like his mother." "I prefer to call it determined," Zara replied with mock indignation, drawing a rare laugh from Vincent. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the colors deepened and stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "I've been thinking," Zara said finally, "about what you said, about the future." Vincent turned to look at her, his expression carefully neutral. "And when I came west, I thought I knew what I wanted: a husband, a home, a family. And then when everything fell apart, I thought those dreams were over." Zara looked down at her hands, then back up at Vincent's face. "I never imagined I'd find all those things in a different way with a different man." Hope flickered in Vincent's eyes, but he remained still, waiting for her to continue. "Matthew needs a father," Zara said softly. "A real one, not the man who abandoned us before he was even born. And I—" She took a deep breath. "I need someone who sees me for who I am, not who he wants me to be." "Zara," Vincent's voice was rough with emotion. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying I've fallen in love with you, Vincent Blackburn," Zara replied, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Not because you rescued me, but because of who you are every day since, honorable, kind, strong." Vincent reached for her hand, enfolding it in his larger one. "I love you too," he said simply. "Have almost from the beginning, I think, even knowing about my past, about Matthew's father." Your past is what brought you to me, Vincent replied. I could never regret that. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Zara closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home. When they separated, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he whispered. Let me be a father to Matthew. Let me love you both. Yes, Zara answered without hesitation. Yes to all of it. They were married in May, a small ceremony performed by the circuit preacher in the main house living room. Emmett stood as witness, holding Matthew, who gurgled happily throughout the proceedings. Mrs. Thornton and a few neighbors from nearby homesteads attended, bringing food and well wishes. As Vincent placed a simple gold band on Zara's finger and promised to love and cherish her for all his days, she felt the final pieces of her broken dreams reforming into something stronger, more beautiful than what had been lost. That night, after the guests had gone and Matthew was asleep in his cradle, moved now to a small adjoining room, Vincent led Zara to what was now their bedroom. I have something for you, he said, retrieving a small package from the dresser drawer. Inside, Zara found papers, legal documents that she scanned quickly, her eyes widening as she understood their significance. Adoption papers, Vincent explained. If you're agreeable, I'd like to legally become Matthew's father. He'd carry the Blackburn name, be my son in every way that matters. Tears filled Zara's eyes. You've already done so much, I want to do this, Vincent interrupted gently, not out of obligation, but because I already love him as my own. Yes, Zara whispered, overwhelmed by the depth of his commitment. Yes, of course. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Zara rested her head on Vincent's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. When I was a little girl, she said softly, I used to dream about finding a love like in the storybooks, a grand romance with a handsome prince. Vincent's chest rumbled with quiet laughter. Sorry to disappoint you with a weathered cowboy instead. Zara propped herself up to look into his face. That's just it, you're not a disappointment. You're better than any storybook prince because you're real, your love is real. She touched his cheek gently. When everything I thought I wanted disappeared, you showed me what I truly needed. Vincent pulled her close, his arms strong around her. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that. You already are, Zara assured him, settling back against his chest. You already are. As the seasons changed, Blackburn Ranch flourished under their combined care. Vincent expanded the cattle operation, while Zara started a small vegetable garden that soon grew to supply most of their produce needs. Matthew grew from an infant to a toddler, taking his first steps across the porch that autumn, his small hands reaching for Vincent, who knelt with open arms, encouraging him forward. Pa, Matthew called as he wobbled those final steps into Vincent's embrace. Pa. The word brought tears to Vincent's eyes as he swept the boy into the air. That's right, son. I'm your pa. Zara watched from the doorway, her heart full. The wound of William's betrayal had healed, leaving only the occasional scar tissue of memory that twinged when she least expected it. But those moments grew fewer and farther between as their new life together deepened. In the spring of Matthew's second year, Zara discovered she was expecting again. Vincent's joy was boundless, his protective instincts even more pronounced than they had been during her first pregnancy. I'm not made of glass, Zara laughed one evening when he insisted on carrying her up the stairs despite her protests. Humor me, Vincent replied, not loosening his hold. I wasn't there for the beginning last time. I don't want to miss a moment now. Their daughter, Elizabeth Martha Blackburn, was born on a clear December night with Vincent holding Zara's hand throughout the labor. When she was placed in his arms, this child of his blood as well as his heart, the look of wonder on his face was identical to when he had first held Matthew. She's perfect, he whispered, gently touching the downy blonde hair that covered her head. Just like her mother. Matthew, not quite 3, was fascinated by his baby sister, peering into her cradle with solemn curiosity. Mine, he asked, pointing to the infant. Yes, she's your sister, Zara confirmed. You'll need to help look after her, be a good big brother. Matthew nodded with all the seriousness a toddler could muster. I help. As the children grew, so did the ranch. Vincent added a wing to the house to accommodate their expanding family. And by the time Matthew was 10, Blackburn Ranch was known throughout the territory as one of the most successful operations in the region. Life wasn't always easy. There were drought years when the creek ran dry and cattle had to be sold at a loss. There was the winter of '85 when blizzards lasted for weeks, trapping them indoors with dwindling supplies. There was the scarlet fever that swept through the territory when Elizabeth was 6, leaving her weakened for months afterward. But through it all, the foundation Vincent and Zara had built remained strong. Their love, born in unlikely circumstances and tested by life's challenges, only deepened with passing years. On the evening of their 20th anniversary, Vincent led Zara out to the porch where they had shared their first kiss. The ranch was quiet. Matthew, now 22, was away at college in Denver, studying to be a veterinarian. Elizabeth, 19 and as headstrong as her mother, was visiting friends in Laramie. The two younger boys, Joseph and Thomas, had been sent to spend the night with Emmett and his wife in the house they'd built on the edge of the property years earlier. "Remember this?" Vincent asked, gesturing to the bench where they sat so long ago. "How could I forget?" Zara replied, leaning against his shoulder. At 42, her hair showed strands of silver among the brown, and fine lines marked the corners of her eyes. To Vincent, she had never been more beautiful. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He handed her a small, leather-bound book. Opening it, Zara found it filled with his handwriting dates, short entries, small sketches. "What is this?" she asked, turning the pages with care. "Started keeping it the day Matthew was born," Vincent explained. "Just little moments I didn't want to forget. First time he smiled at me, first time you kissed me. The day Elizabeth took her first steps, Joseph losing his front tooth, Thomas riding by himself for the first time." Zara's eyes filled with tears as she read random entries, glimpses of their life together captured in Vincent's careful hand. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "Been thinking lately about that day you arrived in Laramie," Vincent said, his arm around her shoulders. "How different things might have been if I hadn't gone to town that afternoon, if I hadn't seen you outside the post office." "Do you ever regret it?" Zara asked. "Taking in a pregnant stranger, raising another man's child as your own," Vincent's answer was immediate and firm. "Not for a single moment. Matthew is my son in every way that matters, and you." He turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "You are the best decision I ever made." Zara leaned forward to kiss him, marveling at how the simple touch could still send warmth spreading through her after all these years. "When William abandoned me, I thought it was the end of everything," she murmured against his lips. "I never imagined it would be the beginning of something so much better." Vincent pulled her closer, his arms strong and sure around her. "I promised I'd be there for both of you," he reminded her. "Best promise I ever made." As the sun set over the Wyoming landscape, they both loved, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Zara rested her head on her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that sometimes life's greatest detours led to the most beautiful destinations. From the ashes of abandonment, they had built a life filled with love, family, and purpose, proof that sometimes the stories that begin with heartbreak can end with the greatest happiness of all.